on. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Hey. Thank you so much for helping us close out PAX. This is it. We're the last ones at the bar. We're the freaks. Thank you for coming to our talk about preserving stuff. We're going to start with strawberries, which have very distinct qualities. No, that is a joke. So I'm Frank Cifaldi. I represent a charity that I founded in 2016 called the Video Game History Foundation. I think a lot of you here probably know us. Show of hands, does anyone not know us? Okay, a couple new people, great. So yeah, we're a charity that, well, the tagline is we preserve, celebrate, and teach the history of video games. What that tends to mean is that we are a library of archival material. We collect and provide the things that people need to tell the story of video games. And what that tends to mean is a lot of documentation, a lot of reference material. Not so much the games themselves. People have abilities to play them legally or not, but we give them context. And we mostly do that as a digital library. We just launched it finally this year, January 30th of this year. And you can go check it out right now. It's at archive.gamehistory.org. As for me, like I said, I started this in 2016, but really as a person, I've been preserving video game history for 25 years. I don't have a formal education in this at all. And I actually kind of stumbled my way into video games. I was an editor for a long time, mainly in trade publications like Gama Sutra and Game Developer. Short stint at 1UP as an editor, if anyone remembers that website. Yeah, I got a woo, yeah. I did end up in game development as well. I worked at a company called Other Ocean, which kind of spun off into what's now Digital Eclipse. So I produced some of the earlier game compilations there. Mega Man Legacy Collection was my baby. Yeah, that's right. SNK 40th, come on, no one bought that. All right, there's 3, okay, great. And really, I like the whole time I was in the industry, it was really the history that appealed to me the most, and you know, what became the foundation was always sort of my dream. It just wasn't a job until I forced it to be one, excuse me. But again, I found it kind of as a frustrated historian. I was someone who wanted to tell history, but there were no resources in the world, and so I just started doing it on my own. This is what we're kind of do today. This is our agenda. So we're going to talk about what happens to sort of archival game material, where it should go, and where we kind of fit in the foundation in the world in terms of collecting and archiving this stuff. I'm going to tell you some stories. Who likes stories? We like stories? Yeah! And we're going to go into that digital library and how we got there and why we got there. I'm going to kind of give you some life lessons at the end. Okay, so we're all in agreement that we should preserve stuff, right? Yeah, I got exactly 1 clap from that person, just a single clap. That was great. So we're all in agreement that people who engage with video game development, especially, but even fan material, things like that, like a lot of that material should be preserved and kept, right? So that future generations kind of understand where they came from. I'm not going to get into the specifics of like what kinds of stuff we're talking about, but just in general, just stuff, right? We're all in agreement should be preserved. So what do you do with it? Option 1 is the one that works in most cases. This is usually what I recommend, what I encourage people to do if they're comfortable with it, which is just put it online and kind of hope it survives, basically. But you know, this has a lot of pros. The biggest pro is that it gets that material in the hands of the most people possible, and so, you know, by far it will be utilized and seen by more people than with any other option. You know, the sort of downsides would be people have to know that it's there, right? And it has to still be there when they go looking for it. Option 2 tends to be donating it to an institution, like a traditional library or museum or something like that, right? And again, pros and cons, right? Your stuff is cataloged, it's cared for. You've got, depending on the institution, you might have conservationists who like study the pH levels of different acids and like properly conserve things. And but again, downsides to that approach is that typically a lot of asterisks in my words today, but we'll hopefully that'll make sense later. Typically, a traditional archive is kind of on-site only, right? So material that is at a museum. If they have a proper library with that system in place, if a historian, if someone wants to utilize that material to tell a story, they're going to have to travel, they're going to have to be on site, they're going to have to sit there and, in a laboratory in the best of cases and engage with the content, which I don't know, is anyone into playing JRPGs in a library? The archives tend to, for the most part, be entirely physical, right? So like paper material is something that you can't like Control F with your brain, right? Like you have to actually page through it with your hands, et cetera. And finally, and this is maybe the most important thing in justifying our existence at the foundation, is that a traditional institution tends to be very risk averse, right? Like a museum that is answering to board members, that was established, with a trust, they have to adhere to very strict standards, frankly, so they don't lose their license as a nonprofit, right? Or get sued by rights holders or anything like that. So again, they all have strengths and weaknesses. Don't take these numbers too seriously. I'm just trying to illustrate a point, right? And when it comes to video game history in the United States, I'm really talking about two organizations here that are really of note, that are doing this kind of work that I'm describing. So the Internet Archive tends to be the repository of stuff. That's where people just kind of dump things. And the Strong Museum of Play is ahead of really any other institution in terms of physical archiving and more importantly, availability to researchers of material. Like if you donate something to the Strong, they catalog it and they will, for free, retrieve it to anyone who comes to them. Again, the problem is you have to go to them. You have to go to Rochester. In my 25 years of preserving video game history, and this is the advice I give to anyone who asks me, how do I get into preserving video game history? What do I do? First of all, it's not a job, but second of all, I just find the cracks and I fill them, right? Like I find the Frank-shaped holes and I go, I know how to fill that hole. It's kind of like this, depending on the shape, and do it. And so when I started this institution, the Video Game History Foundation, I tried to find that sort of middle space. I don't think we're really 4 stars and everything. Again, just don't take the numbers seriously. It almost seems like I'm throwing shade at these other two, but I'm not. I'm just trying to illustrate that I think that 3 approaches are necessary, at least 3 approaches. I really credit how we got here and our success to really these 3 things. We have a really nice logo, right? Like we appear as a very strong, clean, respectful source for this kind of work, right? And so we establish that sort of institutional trust, but because we're kind of small and scrappy, we also have sort of a lot of the freedoms that an individual archivist might have. I think this is really big. We're our own target audience. Everyone at the foundation, all 2 full-time employees, are people who have a background telling video game history and being in communities of video game historians and archivists who understand the needs of freaks like us. And finally, and this is pretty big, we don't focus on anything else, right? We are the Video Game History Foundation. We focus on preserving video game history. We don't have to do anything else, so we don't get distracted. So it's story time. So I'm going to tell you some stories because stories are fun, and we don't do a lot of this at the foundation. We don't do enough, I think. I don't want to say bragging, but just like telling people about the cool stuff we do. So I'd like to do that today. But it's not just for fun though. It's also I just kind of want to illustrate the need for what I see as this middle space, right? So I think every one of these stories will sort of illustrate the need for filling that gap. So let's talk about prototype video games, right? This is something that I think when a lot of people in online communities think of video game preservation, this is kind of what they think of, right? Like unreleased stuff or rough drafts of games, things like that. These are some examples of things that we've worked with. The one on the left is Power Up Baseball. That was actually an arcade sort of sequel to NBA Jam with Major League Baseball. Didn't work, but they tried. The middle one, this was really exciting. This was a demo done by a studio called Argonaut for the Game Boy that established that they could do 3D rendering on that little potato thing, the Game Boy, and it literally is what led to them getting work at Nintendo and making Star Fox. Is that they demonstrated to Nintendo with this exact demo that they could do 3D. It's a really important part of history. And then on the right is Simcopter 64, kind of a retooling of that game for the N64 that never got released. But something that I focus a lot on is the NES in particular when it comes to unreleased games. I could go on about this for hours. I've done videos on this. I'm not going to go super deep here, but I think the NES era of games is really interesting in terms of unshipped product because not most, but a lot of games were completed and are of high quality and like by all means could have been released, but they were done, just not sold to people. You know what I mean? They weren't canceled. They were completed, but they just didn't kind of pay to manufacture them. And so I think the NES sort of has this secret like B-side library of totally finished games, and I'm fascinated by that. NES games, when we find unreleased ones, they tend to look something like this. They're usually one-of-a-kind objects that were sort of handmade either by their authors or by someone in like PR or something like that, or like someone in sales maybe was like demonstrating the game, things like that. And again, they're usually one-of-a-kind objects when we find them. Like that one on the right, that is Hard Drivin'. It's based on an Atari arcade game. My friend Mark Morris was crazy enough to port that 3D racing game to the NES, and this was just his personal copy that he burned to take home when he left the company, and that's all that exists, right? But they're not all internal use. I kind of alluded to this earlier. A lot of these were sent out to people, and this is one of those people. This is Ed Samrad, on the right specifically, is Ed Samrad. Ed was a video game reviewer, and in those days, if you were getting games to review in print, in a magazine, you kind of had to get them like 3 months ahead of time in order for the magazine to print that review and be on shelves when the game was out. And so he was sent a lot of this material. And Ed is someone who hasn't really been around in the industry since like 97, something like that. He's just very happily retired. I kind of figured that Ed might be someone who was sent a lot of these things and might theoretically, have some of these prototype games. And I got to know him over the years, and finally a few years ago was invited into his home. And again, I was just kind of hoping, maybe he had a few handfuls of prototype games stored away, because he mentioned he kept all of his games, and he had a couple, not a ton. But I mean, this was stuff that just going back to actually the early 80s, because Ed was, before he started Electronic Gaming Monthly, he had a weekly newspaper column where he was reviewing games, and he just got he got things in the mail to review, and this is great. This was a treasure trove, and in Ed's case, when he's looking at these things, he's like, well, I don't want to be rid of them. These are my games. I don't necessarily play them anymore, but I kind of want to leave them for my son, for example, to figure out when I'm gone. And, God bless. So instead of acquiring this material and taking it home with me, I sat at his kitchen table and just copied every one of the damn things. And he had no issue with that, right? Like he wanted to keep the physical property, but he didn't mind the data being preserved for the sake of education. This is a very peaceful scene, actually. Like just off camera is Ed this is on a Sunday. He put on a football game and he had a giant bowl of popcorn and he just immediately fell asleep. And goals, honestly. And so, we digitized all this stuff, and I think a lot of you in this room probably know this, but there is a thriving community online of people who sort of research game development by looking at these sort of prototype games, right? And so, in this situation, we figured that our role didn't really need to be that much more complicated than a conduit between ed and the internet, right? So we kind of hooked up different communities that examine this stuff with the prototypes. So, we sent the Master System games to the Master System guy. We sent the Atari games to the Atari guy. That would be Omar Cornut and Matt Reichert, respectively. And this is a wiki called Hidden Palace. We sent the rest there. And we did keep one for ourselves. This is a game called Super Sushi Pinball. It is ridiculous. And it's something that we thought we could sort of use as an educational moment for people who were interested in video games by sort of pausing and examining this one specific unreleased game. There is a YouTube video about it. You should go watch it. I put it out in Christmas 2023. Like I said, very ridiculous game. It is. So it was in Japan just a regular ass pinball game, right? It has nothing to do with sushi. For some reason, when they were thinking of localizing it here, they didn't really add a sushi theme, despite the key art that you're seeing here on the flyer. Do you see the text on above? So I swear to God, that's like a 2-minute, excruciatingly slow text crawl. With this weird music that's explaining to Americans the then new concept of a sushi restaurant. And it goes on forever. It goes through terminology and history. And at the end, I swear, it just says, there's no sushi in this game. We just thought this would be a fun way to teach you. And then you play like a robot sushi game. But and of course, we published this video and everything, but we just kind of threw the ROM to the Hidden Palace wiki, the one that I mentioned earlier, and it's just kind of part of the public record in terms of accessible games. And the reason I bring all this up is that getting to Ed, getting to his stuff, bringing all that equipment, this costs time and money, right? This is something where I spent a really long time building that relationship and that trust with Ed, which, being the foundation, of course, helped us with, right? We are an institution. I'm not just some guy knocking on his door. But I made it my job to be able to kind of go on site and be able to archive these things because we are a nonprofit that is funded by individuals who believe in this kind of work, right? They fund us so that we can go do this kind of thing. And the reason that I can be that flexible and just kind of show up to Chicago when I feel like it, not when I feel like it, but when it makes sense, is that, we don't operate a physical museum that I have to go staff or anything like that. It's really just two guys in an office doing this kind of thing, right? And the third thing that is unique in this situation is that I mentioned earlier that we didn't care that he wanted to keep the physical material. That's unusual for an archive. That's not a normal way of doing things, but it is something that we've kind of tried to establish as part of our processes, is that in situations where the physical material doesn't provide a lot of material value to a researcher, we don't care where that goes. We just care that the data that it contains is available for people to use. Another quick story, this is Chris Oberth. Chris unfortunately passed away quite a while ago. He was a programmer going back to the early arcade days. My favorite work of his by far is an arcade game called Anteater. Pause for woo, no woo, that's okay. A lot of people don't know Anteater, it's brilliant. But we're talking about NES. He actually did work on some NES stuff, including American Gladiators. I'm not going to pause for woo on that; it doesn't deserve it. But Chris, like I said, passed away, and his family was trying to figure out what to do with his stuff. And he collected video games. He was a huge fan of games, and they were selling his retail video games on eBay to sort of help pay the bills and stuff like that. But as they kind of got deeper and deeper, like digging through his man cave, you know, they started getting to like Chris's actual work, right? And so this actually was it was a hard drive backup from like 1992 spread across, I believe it was 37 floppy disks, something like that. This was awful because, well, it was great, but it was awful because when I say it's across 37 floppy disks, I don't mean that he like dragged some files on each disk. I mean that he used a backup utility that spread that data across all 37 disks and compressed it and was very proprietary. And if one of those disks failed, we would not have any of it, right? And so, anyone know Foon? Anyone know that name in the audience? Yeah, Foon rules. Foon is local to me. Foon has a lot of vintage hardware. This is something that we couldn't like emulate to like reconstitute that hard drive, but Foon actually was able to, we dumped the disks and Foon was able to replicate those disks and reburn them and able to basically reconstitute Chris's hard drive. And we essentially had his complete development environment from his time at Incredible Technologies is where he was. They're still going. That's the Golden Tee people. Back then, they were doing some console stuff. And we dug up his environment. We figured out his tooling. And we built an NES game no one had ever seen before. This is Chris's version of Days of Thunder based on the Tom Cruise movie. There is, just for anyone being pedantic, yes, there is a Days of Thunder game that came out on the NES. It wasn't this one. I don't know why this one didn't. I think, I suspect that they just didn't like it, so they started over with another studio or something like that. But like I said, we got his whole dev environment. We were able to build the game, and we decided, what the heck, this is another education moment. Let's just pop it on GitHub. So Chris's whole environment for Days of Thunder is there. You can go learn how to compile the way he did. You can go modify the game however you want. And again, you can kind of learn how things were done, at least, at his studio with his tooling. And again, I think it's another situation where if we weren't an institution, if it was just this guy, Frank, that this might not have come together. And that included the funding because, the family was looking for help when they came to us. And so we made a purchase of Chris's archival material in order to preserve it. I will say that this work was impossible without being able to share it with remote volunteers. Because I don't know 6502 assembly. Becky, I know you do. And I could probably go to you for help. But in a traditional environment where things are kind of kept under lock and key within an archive, I can't, get help over the internet, right? I can't even get to like a Foon to like help me reconstitute the work. And I don't think most institutions, traditional, museum-style institutions would have just popped it on GitHub and said, basically asked for forgiveness, not permission, right? Okay, I think this is our last sort of NES story. This is SimCity. Everyone knows SimCity, right? Don't need to introduce SimCity. SimCity was a launch title. Well, it was a computer game first, but it was also later a launch title for the Super Nintendo. And they took this sort of very computery simulation game, and they rubbed a bunch of Nintendo on it, right? And they made it a much more Nintendo-friendly product. But a lot of people don't know that it actually started life not on the Super Nintendo, on the original NES. They scrapped it and kind of moved on to the 16-bit platform. And this wasn't just like an internal test kind of thing. Like, this was an announced product, right? It was in Nintendo's magazine. It was in Nintendo Power. Anyone check out the Art of Nintendo Power exhibit at the show, by the way? Heck yeah. And they displayed it at trade shows. It was playable to people. That is actual footage from the Winter CES show in '91. And that is the last time anyone saw it. It disappeared, it got canceled, until it walked into a game store near Redmond. Weird. And so, it walked in, and this individual who had the game, actually 2 copies of the game, you can see 2 of them there, and I think that's Dr. Mario in the middle. He brought it into this game store. The game store recognized, like, okay, this is a big deal. And what they decided to do was to entertain financial offers for SimCity, for what might be the only copies left of the SimCity project. And they took them to a show called Portland Retro Gaming Expo. Yeah. I'll be there this year if you're going. And the idea was they were going to meet with some of the higher end collectors and sort of try to talk through like what their options were for SimCity. I knew I wanted to preserve this thing, right? This is sort of like holy grail material for someone like me who's interested in unreleased NES material, right? So I knew I had to get kind of creative because I don't have infinite money. At the time, the Video Game History Foundation, we were doing these sort of pop-up museum exhibits at Portland Retro. That year's theme was already decided well in advance. It was the 40-year anniversary of the Atari 2600. And so we had already designed that, but over in the corner, I made a little honey trap. So I presumed correctly that someone in the Redmond area who had SimCity probably worked at least in the industry and very likely for Nintendo. And so I kind of wanted to demonstrate that we were an institution that handled these things with respect, that preserving work like that offered opportunities that might in some situations be worth a little bit more than money. And you know, long story short, you know, we met with the owner and we worked something out, and this is actually my friend Christian who ended up buying one of his cartridges and helped us preserve the ROM from that. You know, we worked out a situation where he actually took less money than he could have because he believed in the idea that material like this should be preserved and shared and studied, and so it actually created this really interesting situation where I don't know, like I never really looked into before this the creation of SimCity on the Nintendo, but it was like this international game jam collab between like Will Wright and Miyamoto, like the hottest game designer in the U.S. and Japan at that time, kind of came together and chocolate and peanut buttered this thing, and it's a really interesting story that, you know, we took the time to sort of publish on our website. And indeed, that ROM, like the others, we donated to the Hidden Palace Wiki project. It's just there. It's on the Internet Archive, etc. And again, I think, you know, this is a situation that was very uniquely us, right? Like, I don't know that anyone else is stupid enough to like make a honeypot, right? Just to preserve a game. But again, being that we are a funded institution, that individuals like donate money to us, we have the time and resources to do this, right? And we have the time and resources to plot this out, to like build an exhibit, to show up. But in addition to that, there is that institutional trust, right? Like the owner saw what we were doing and believed in it, and we were able to work that out. This is kind of a hot take maybe, but if there's something to take away from these last few things, if you are someone who might own an unreleased game, think about, you know, what you want people to do with it, right? Like if you want a lot of people to actually access it, I don't think you should send it to a museum. A museum typically, again, asterisk here, like people can be a little bit flexible, but for the most part, if an unreleased game goes to a museum, their hands are tied at that point, and it's kind of forever doomed to be an on-site only access thing, and I don't think people play games in libraries. Okay, so that's prototype stuff. Let's talk about kind of source material, right? Like the raw things that go into making a video game. We talked about source code a little bit with Chris's example, and these are some other examples. Like we have the source code and tools and everything for, this is on the left, Disney's Aladdin on the Sega Genesis. That's actually the animation tool. And we were able to sort of like put that together and explain how it was made through its code, which I think is cool. The middle one it's just another very crazy thing that deserves its own story I don't have time for, which is that that thing is called the Sega VR, the thing that's on a mannequin helmet. This was an actual VR helmet for the Sega Genesis in like 1994, when it absolutely would not have worked at all. It would have been a really, really bad idea. But you know, this is something that was kind of close to being marketed. marketed. It's something that was at trade shows. And we had source code for one of the games that was being made on the Sega VR, and there were just enough clues in the code for Rich Whitehouse, one of our volunteer engineers, to be able to figure out how the thing works. And he actually like emulated this helmet that might no longer exist through this game source code. Thing on the right was actually the original source files for Earthbound's localization, the Nintendo RPG, which we were able to recover and actually learn some new insight about how the game was made. But I want to talk about this game. Anyone know this one? Yeah. This is The Secret of Monkey Island. I usually call it my favorite game of all time. I think that might be true. It's a game I've fanboyed over the years many, many times. I've read interviews with the developers, a lot of it about their sort of famous scripting language that put this game together. It's called Scum with 2 M's. And you know, I'd met the creators over the years. They're great. And I got a hold of the source material, the source code that I shouldn't have for The Secret of Monkey Island through some kind of unconventional means. So this was kind of outside my house, and this truck just spilled over, and there was just all this stuff over the street, and we all ran out because we were like, oh my God, what happened, right? There's just chocolate over the street, and I was like, guys, I think this chocolate is the secret of Monkey Island. And my neighbors, that's Jason Scott, the archivist in the hat, they were all like, Frank, you can't go in there. I'm like, I have to, this is the secret of Monkey Island, and they're trying to pull me back, but it was too late for me. Like I dove in, right? Like this was like a dream for me, being able to like, go into the Matrix basically with my favorite game and like see what was actually under the hood and like see the tools that these guys used to make the game. And I taught myself Scum, right? Like I looked up the surviving like internal documentation, and I dug assets out of like literally the trash, like a folder called trash, and I was like, I rebuilt things that got cut from the game, right? So that room on the right, like that really cool dripping animation, I suspect by Sam and Max creator Steve Purcell, when he was there at the time, I think he did that. I found like an early Guybrush like sprite model sheet, and I was able to sort of learn this and build from it and just like geek out over like getting into my actual favorite game of all time. And but unlike material before, like Days of Thunder, right? This is a game that is not only owned by what is now Disney, it's still being currently sold by Disney. So this is something where getting it online, at least through us, was something that we just didn't feel comfortable with. So we really took our time to try to educate with it. And so we kind of did the next best thing. And I contacted Ron Gilbert, who was basically the creator of the Monkey Island series. And we did a live stream together where we kind of taught people through his own memories and through looking through the source material and even his notebooks, how the game came together. And this is something that I really wish like I could give this experience to anyone else. I don't even know how to I tried to think of an analogy of like what this is like. The best I could come up with is like jamming in your favorite band. You know what I mean? Like I actually like kind of made Monkey Island stuff with Ron. Like that's crazy. But it also was not just an educational moment, it was even a fundraising moment. Ron lent his time and was great, and we sold virtual tickets, and we actually raised, I think, something like $10,000 to help us with our preservation work because of this. And we tried to work with Lucasfilm to see if they wanted to participate. It didn't really make sense for them, but that material that we dug up through that material, the material we dug up through the source code that was kind of highly secretive, arguably, ended up in an official product. Like the research that we did ended up in the book in this limited run games collection. So it's kind of like I took that raw chocolate and like molded it back together into something, a bunny, I believe. But again, like the takeaway here, I think, is that we expose, the industry tends to be really hesitant about sharing that source material for a variety of reasons, a lot of them legal. But I think we were able to demonstrate that using source code in the hands of an historian can actually be a really interesting tool, not just to teach, but to, even for the sake of the rights holders, for people to engage with that brand, right? Like people were really into it. Like the fans were into it, and there was no negativity to it. People were just having fun learning. I think everyone benefited, including us, like I said. And Ron made a new Monkey Island because of me, probably. You're welcome. It's really, thank you. I had nothing to do with it. It was definitely in development already, but it's really interesting watching that stream now, knowing, because I didn't know that a new one was in development, so that was fun. Again, takeaway, I don't think any of this happens in a closed archive, right? That project took 2 months. I can't sit in a lab for 2 months learning Scum, right? And I had remote volunteers who were learning with me, who built a lot of that stuff, for us even. And this is a project that in a traditional institution would require copyright sign-off, copyright holder sign-off, which we didn't have, though we did try. I wish I didn't have to wait for trucks to spill for this kind of thing, but and I believe in a future where companies see the educational value of source code like this and provide it, but we're not there yet. Real quick, so I'm going to go through some personal archival stuff that we've archived over the years. The examples here on the left, that's Michael Mendheim, who did the Mutant League series. He donated his paperwork to us. The one in the middle, that's my friend Gabe Swar, who's in the animation industry. He worked on the character designs back in like the GameCube days. That's a character design for Go-Go Hypergrind. The one on the right is from a producer who worked at Konami, who kept his faxes that are very ridiculous. They're actually online right now on archive.gamehistory.org, the Mark Flipman collection. They're very funny. But I want to talk about Game Informer, at least the original one. Game Informer's back now, but the original run of it ran from 91 to 2024, which is crazy. Back in 2017, when the foundation started, that was year one, the magazine was still thriving, and the editors who I knew kind of wanted some advice on the material that they kept. And they were trying to explain to me, like, we have a lot of stuff, and I'd be like, what kind of stuff? And they'd be like, everything? and I just couldn't really they were just kind of asking me, what do we do, right? We don't want to be responsible for history dying because we didn't take care of it. What do we do? Do you have advice? And I said, let me just kind of come over and scope this out because I can't conceive of what you're talking about. So flew to Minneapolis. They hate when I show this picture, but this is like one of the storage closets that they have that they didn't actually tour people through for the most part, but this is where they just kind of crammed stuff, right? And when I say stuff, I mean actually going back to the beginning of the magazine in 1991. Like they had a bunch of review ROMs just in a box called Old ROMs. They had gold master discs that were burned to them and the CD. Like it was just like dream come true for me, right? Like there were press kits with like high resolution art. They had these filing cabinets with like every piece of paper that was ever mailed to them or grabbed at a trade show or anything. Like literally they had to drill the lock because they lost the key like a decade ago. Just endless things. I'm like there was film, that's like the box art for Shaq Fu on like high resolution film, photos from trade shows, like Bonk and Zonk hanging out, 35 millimeter slides, just endless just material that, that's the closet after a week. Like so much of my job is like cleaning basements. But at the end of the trip, like I organized it, I scoped it out, and it was just an inconceivable amount of material. Like my rough estimate of just like optical discs, really, like this kind of stuff, right? Just optical discs of data of some kind. Sorry, went too far. That's not a retail game. I estimated like you're in like the 8,000 to 12,000 range of discs, right? That have maybe one of a kind data on them, And you know, I still think this is true to this day. I think this was the most important intact collection of dense video game material in the world, and I just don't think there's even any comparison. Challenge, kind of like Ed Semrad, owners want to keep this stuff in the office, right? It's like, look, we still have we are still a magazine, right? This is stuff that was sent to us to use in our magazine. We still use it, maybe. We also, again, we're a magazine. We work with these publishers. We have concerns about things leaking out that they don't want out there, and us looking bad because of it. And again, of course, the challenge of digitizing this stuff was pretty insurmountable. It was just thousands and thousands of things. And then also, you know, to my mind, it's 2017. This is a print magazine. Even back then, that industry wasn't on its best, you know, legs. And so I was a little bit concerned about the longevity of keeping this stuff intact at a magazine office. And I only saw one solution to this problem, which is that I needed to go there, and I did. So in 2019, I organized an army of volunteers, and we lived in Minneapolis for 5 weeks, and we just full-time, nonstop digitized stuff. We built a robot farm that ripped discs. Every night, I took home like boxes of paperwork that I like carried like 3 blocks to my hotel so I could sort it and like take the staples out so the next day I'd have time to like scan it and stuff like that. And you know, we didn't really have a plan other than like, if this building catches on fire tomorrow, I want to know that we saved as much data as we could, right? And we'll figure out access later. I don't care. This is too important. So we did what we could, and you know, by the end of the trip, June 2019, it's like we got through maybe like 70% of it or something like that. Like a lot of stuff, like 25 terabytes of stuff just on a NAS. And it was like, okay, maybe we'll come back next year, finish the job, June 2019. And so in March 2020, we all went home, including Game Informer. And they never went back. They became a remote magazine, a remotely staffed magazine, and all that material remained in the office, unutilized, and then they shut down. So, you know, they never got back to that office. They never got back to that stuff. And I've spoken to the staff who were there at the time and who are now rehired. What a miracle, by the way, that like not only did they get the magazine back with the new investor, they hired literally everyone who was laid off. That's incredible. But they didn't have access to this stuff, and in fact, they don't know where it is. That stuff that was in the office is gone. The stuff that we digitized is lost forever. I'm kidding, we took it. We actually went back in, we went back December 2019, and we took, they finally offered us, like, they kind of realized after we were there for 5 damn weeks, it's like, okay, these guys know what they're doing, you know? And so we took all of the sort of like, not retail stuff, right? We didn't take their video game closet. I don't know if anyone's seen videos of the vault, but we didn't take any of that. We took like the paper and the press kits, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, we're now the proud stewards of that stuff. And again, I think this is something that not many institutions could have done. And this is something that, again, I just want to kind of hammer home the idea of like, you need a funded institution because people's labor should be paid for, including mine. I didn't pay myself for 5 years, but that's not for lack of trying. Like this is what needs to happen for people to be able to like stop their lives and do this kind of work. And you know, this was a very expensive project. This is a time when we didn't have paid staff. In fact, this was entirely volunteer, and yet this really was a $40,000 project. You know, you add up just plane trips, hotels, you know, equipment, like building that robot farm was really expensive. Just the like trucking it back, and like we paid like the highest security possible. We had like a dedicated truck. It was like, I'm not losing this. It's one of a kind. So yeah, again, this is something that I think, again, if there's a theme here, it's that we're kind of finding our niche and trying to do things that we don't think anyone else can do. So really quick, I want to talk about video game magazines. This is something that we spend a lot of time working with and processing because we think like Game Informer and its collection, magazines are kind of one of the densest forms of history, at least during, the reign of the magazine, right? When print media was king, kind of before the internet. This is a magazine, it's called Computer Entertainer. Did anyone see our announcement about this? Yeah, okay. So Computer Entertainer was a newsletter that ran in the 1980s, and it's really fascinating for a lot of reasons. Well, first of all, it was run by two sisters in LA, so it was like a women-run magazine in the 80s for video games. That's crazy. One of them, Mary Lou, her day job was at Warner Brothers Records. She managed Prince, like the artist, like who was then known as Prince, and like this was her side hustle. Was she had this mail order video game business that also had a newsletter. But what is maybe the most remarkable thing about Computer Entertainer is that I think we've all at least heard the term the video game industry crash, right? Like home console games in the US were just kaput. You were there, Becky. They were kaput. They were just, no one was making them anymore in the 80s because it was just a complete colossal crash. And so with them went the video game media. There weren't any video game magazines. No one was talking about video games in print. Except for them, they somehow survived and just kept talking about video games, probably because, come to think of it, like us, they were small and scrappy. They could survive these things. And so it leads to really interesting situations like, oh, is this the only review of Super Mario Brothers from when it came out? So far, we think yes, at least in English, at least in the US. This might be the only publication that was like looking at Nintendo when it came back. And so we acquired, I shouldn't even say we, it was I. Like before the foundation started, it was like 2012, I found one of the editors, Mary Lou, and she sent her own personal copies of this newsletter to us. And we did some, at the time, kind of serviceable scans. They weren't really good enough. Unfortunately, her sister, Celeste, this is her, she's a little photo shy, passed this year, and Mary Lou, had the bummer job of kind of cleaning out Celeste's house, and she was like, "Hey, I found Celeste's volumes. Do you want these as well?" And I talked to Mary Lou, and I was like, "I think you're are you now the copyright holder solely of this stuff?" And she said, "Yeah." And so, long story short, we acquired it. We worked something out with Mary Lou, and we're now the rights holders to this very fundamentally important historical document called Computer Entertainer. And because we now had a duplicate set, this is so hard for me to do, we made the very difficult decision to take a razor to one of them and get all the pages out and like scan them properly. And they're now out there, and you can, and not only did we acquire it and bring it in-house so that it's safe, we also released it under the Creative Commons. So you guys kind of own it too at this point. You can do whatever you want. Thank you. So again, I'm not going to keep harping on how we're great, whatever. So that kind of brings us into this digital archive and how we got here. So the goal of the foundation since its inception has been to build this thing. We want anyone to be able to be a video game historian. Anyone who's interested, who wants to tell the story of video game history, we want them to have the tooling they need to do that. We built this tool from scratch and really for a singular purpose, right? Like, again, video game history, that's all we care about. And we felt that a traditional library structure that was like established in like literally the 17 or 1800s and meant for physical books, like what we were seeing in the world was those rules applied to a digital born media, video games, that just made no sense to us. We needed to build something where a lot of different data types are sort of talking to each other, that like you could look at, development material and also understand like the media context around it and its advertising, stuff like that. Maybe the most important thing though is that we wanted something that like normal people could use, right? Like people who weren't traditional, journalists or historians. It didn't have to like deal with a lot of quirks of practices. step one to building a video game library is hire a librarian. This is Phil Salvador. He's great. And really my needs here were these things. I needed someone who could just like take it and run with it because I didn't have time to oversee it. Someone who could kind of self-manage essentially. Someone who kind of came from a similar community to us and knows the subject matter, has a library background because I don't. And someone, this kind of sounds silly, I guess, but it needed to be someone that I could spend time with because there's literally 2 of us in an office. And that's Phil. That's literally a photo of him volunteering in Minneapolis for that Game Informer project years before I asked him to join us. So lesson being indentured servitude, and maybe I'll hire you. Step 2 is invent a bunch of stuff. I won't go through this, extensively, but there were a lot of issues that we had to kind of overcome, right? Like there aren't a lot of off-the-shelf solutions that do the kinds of things that we do. There aren't a lot of things that like help you search through things the way that we want you to search through things. We had to kind of build a system for like scanning magazines, which is like, I'm not gonna chop our primary copies. I'm gonna wait until we get a duplicate, and then I'm gonna chop that spine off, I'm gonna scan it through, et cetera, et cetera. And we kind of made a tool that turned people into video game historians, I think. That is what we look like. We're all dead inside. And we launched this, like I said, January, and it's so cool seeing people utilize the tool to this day. And it just works, right? That's what we wanted. We don't even ask for your cookies. You don't even get the stupid pop-up that's like, do you consent to cookies? Do you want to reject the unnecessary ones? We don't even do that. Like, you just go there and it works. And you can be like, I want to look at game production material for Sonic the Hedgehog. And it's like, cool, that's all tagged because we have a Phil Salvador and he catalogs everything correctly. You can just go browse magazines. You can go, I want to read Electronic Games, the first game magazine in the US. Like, cool, here they all are in order and they're text searchable. I want to give you a quick example of like a use case, right? I'm a normal person. I want to know about Resident Evil. I want to know the first like mentions of Resident Evil and what people thought about them when they were new. Cool. Search for Resident Evil. In quotes, two things. That's Google. You all know Google foo. So Resident Evil, everything's sorted by date. Okay, what's the earliest mention? Cool. There's this magazine snippet. Kind of interesting. They're comparing it to Alone in the Dark. Was there even a second player in Resident Evil? I don't remember that. But point is, like, you can go there, you search for it, it's there, you can copy paste the text if you want. Let me kind of illustrate though why building our own tool was necessary. Like I said, the Internet Archive tends to be kind of ground zero for this kind of thing. So let's just search for Resident Evil on the Internet Archive. Okay, Resident Evil sorted by date. This Internet Archive, again, is a treasure, it's a marvel, it's got like millions and millions of objects, but it is literally everything, it's all encompassing. So if you search for Resident Evil and you go chronological, I don't know why this Wii Tips book from 2008 is the oldest thing, but the actual oldest thing is there. It's like from 1825. And again, because it's literally everything, you get situations like sewer gas and its dangers. And every sewer or cesspool had within it a Resident Evil spirit. So let's just say you're smart enough to go, okay, I don't need to look at the 1800s. Let's just start at 1996 when Resident Evil was first announced. So you narrow it down. It's like, okay, starting in 96. What are all these identical Russian things with Earthworm Jim? I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't understand this. So, okay, let's go English language only. That helps. That Wii Tip book is still there. The thing is like a virus. But again, even I as a researcher, I'm looking at this and I'm like, why are there 4 identical copies of whatever Game On is, right? And what are these other books that I don't, like, what is this, like Rock and Roll magazine or something? So it's like, okay, let's say starting in 96, only video game magazines, cool. Game On's gone now, even though it's a video game magazine. And again, that's because the Internet Archive relies on community uploads, right? They don't have a fill that like processes everything, right? So they're relying on people who upload to essentially be their own librarians, right? To correctly tag things and put correct dates on them, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have situations like this where somehow Game On is no longer a video game magazine, if you look for it. And And I'm still a little bit confused by this. I'm still confused by like multiple magazines having multiple copies on here. I don't entirely trust the data. This is a frustrating experience for me as an historian, and I imagine it is for a lot of other people too. And that's kind of why we had to build things from scratch. And again, I think we got here because we have the luxury of a single subject matter. We are not the Internet Archive. We're not doing everything. Video game history, that's it. We established early on that this is the core of our business. A charity, unfortunately, has to be a business. It is a business, but like this is core to what we do. We advance the understanding of video game history. We don't do anything else other than that, and so we felt that this was the biggest, most impactful way that we could do that. I really credit a lot of how we got here to the diversity of experience within our staff, both full-time and volunteer. Phil's a librarian, I'm a whatever I am. My wife's a front-end engineer and built our website. And again, being scrappy and small means that we can make quick decisions. But it's not all roses. Some things went wrong. We're not perfect. Being scrappy and small has its downsides. We're kind of slow moving. This thing took at least 3 years, or 8 if you want to count the formation of the foundation. It's a long time. We have a lot of dependencies. First on third-party services for like file hosting and things like that, but also we still depend on volunteer labor. Volunteer labor is great. Complete dependence on it for survival, not great. And at this point, we kind of have an archival debt in like the literal millions in terms of just cost to archive things, just in terms of time and labor and all of that. But if there's a takeaway here when we're talking about preserving video game history, I just want everyone to take away that like, any institution, including ours, like all institutions are going to fail at some point, and we really only have each other. So the video game industry, for example, this is a little bit glib, but the industry, at least as represented by the ESA, they would prefer that libraries not exist. They have fought efforts multiple times in terms of things like offering ways for libraries like ours to provide gameplay over the internet. They have successfully lobbied against groups like ours and will continue to do so. And it's not just providing access. Legally, we can't even like archive games correctly, right? Like breaking copyright protection is something that is still kind of a challenge in a lot of ways. Game companies, like the actual rights holders, they are black holes. They operate as conservative, for-profit companies, and they might have a lot of this material, but like they don't really have a structure in place to provide access to researchers, because that's the librarian's job, and that's not really a job within an institution. There are, of course, archivists internally, but even then, did anyone see Garrett's talk from the PlayStation team? Yeah. So that sort of thing exists, but it's not for the public. It's more for internal. And straight up, I can tell you some horror stories about game companies literally destroying very innocuous things. And I would also say archives, maybe even including ours, aren't really evolving to meet this moment. Like video games, like I said, they're a digital-born medium, but we're kind of stuck treating them legally, especially as physical objects, that's not what video games are anymore. Sorry if you're a collector. The documents, for the most part, if they're donated, are not being scanned and shared. There are some institutions that don't really even have an access plan, but they're taking things anyway. That bothers me. And I don't think anyone's doing any serious effort to legally collect digital games. I think we're only still focused on like the discs that you can buy at Best Buy and calling it a day. And it's not for lack of trying. We just don't. There's not really any way to do that. But again, that includes us. We're not perfect. We're like being scrappy means that we're small, right? We have 2 employees. We don't own our property. We got problems. But the thing is, when it comes to game preservation, even all of you, there's some kind of analogy here with like the slow-moving ships, right, doing some things, and the little boats. And I never really understood that analogy. I tried to look it up, and it led me to this LinkedIn post about I don't really understand, but the point is, all of you out there are little ships. You can all play your part. You can all find how you can affect video game history in your way, and really think about not just how things are done now, like I've illustrated, but how do you want things to be done? Let's kind of create this future together. I am so out of time that I have to go through these, but like, ask yourself a question. Ask yourself these questions, right? If you're in the industry, does the ESA actually represent me when they say they don't want people to study video games over the internet? If you're donating things, and this is maybe the most important takeaway, think about what you want to happen with that material. Do you want it to be accessed by literally anyone? Do you want to be involved in terms of like figuring out what kind of person can access this stuff, which no problem, right? But get involved. Don't just assume that a donation means it's taken care of. Like, kind of get involved, however makes sense to you, because really in the end, all we've got is each other, and this is an infinite challenge, and only we can fix this by working together, I think, and figuring out where our little boats go. And that is all the time I've got. Thank you so much. There is no time for Q&A, I'm sorry. And also, I'm literally going to run out and get in a cab because I got to catch a flight. I'm sorry. Thank you so much.